So let's finally talk about the ending. What the... Hey, what's up you guys? It's Avery from A Very Avid Reader and welcome back to my channel. As you can see, I'm in a little different location today. I am visiting home and these are my bookshelves that I have at home. I wish that these could be my constant background because, you know, it looks nice. But in today's video, I'm excited because I'm going to be doing a review of The Maidens by Alex Michaelides. So I read this book probably a few weeks ago, and I've been wanting to make this review about it because I had a lot of thoughts about the book. And maybe you can tell from my tone, not all of them were great. So I thought I would share some of those thoughts here on the internet and see if anyone else agrees with them. So I will have a non-spoiler part of the book as well as a spoiler-filled part. So if you've read it, then feel free to watch the whole thing. If not, you can kind of, well, you'll see if I even think you should read it. But anyway, but let's just jump right into a review of The Maidens. So first I'll just start off by telling you what the story is about. This book follows a woman named Mariana who is a group psychologist, and her husband has recently passed away. I think it has been a year since he has passed away, and this is not a spoiler. That happens right at the beginning of the book, or we know about it at the beginning of the book. Mariana's niece Zoe is attending Cambridge, and one of Zoe's really close friends gets murdered. And so Mariana goes to Cambridge to, comfort her niece. And Cambridge is also where she and her late husband met, so she is kind of dealing with, loss and grief. When she gets there, Mariana becomes certain that a professor named Edward Fosca is the murderer. He is a professor and he has this group of young women who all attend the university who are part of a special study group with him, and they are called the Maidens. And slowly, as more girls start turning up dead, they are all from this special group of his. And so Mariana is determined to prove that he is the murderer and get justice, as well as protect her niece because she's worried that the same thing might happen to her. So that is just kind of like the overall premise of the book. A lot of crazy things happen. So I gave this book a 2 out of 5 stars. I really was not a fan. And I was a big fan of The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. So that was his novel that came out a few years ago and is super popular, and I really, really loved that book. It's also kind of like a murder mystery thriller situation with a main character who's also a psychologist. That book is known for having a really crazy twist ending, so I kind of knew as I was reading this book that what they were setting things up to be probably wasn't going to be the way it was. I mean, that's the case with most murder mysteries, but I feel like he had big shoes to fill because the Silent Patient twist was so crazy, and I just don't think that he lived up to the hype, and I don't think he lived up to what he did in The Silent Patient. Sorry, Alex. I really liked the premise of this book and I liked the idea of it, but I just do not think it was executed well. So overall, would I recommend this book? I think that there might be other people who enjoy this book more than I do. My issue was really with the ending, but other people might not have the same issue. The book overall has a 3.65 on Goodreads, and that's pretty good. That's pretty average. So I think there are some people who didn't like the ending, but there are some people who did enjoy it. If the premise sounds intriguing to you, then go ahead and read it. Maybe you won't have the same feeling that I did, but I don't think I would recommend it to anybody. My mom was the one who recommended Silent Patient to me, and when I told her I was reading this next book by the same author, we both got really excited, and then after I finished it, I was like, don't read it. It wasn't worth it. One thing I did like about the book was the setting. It takes place in Cambridge, so it's a very kind of like dark academia vibe. We have murder, and as some of you are aware, I just spent the summer studying abroad in Oxford, so Oxford and Cambridge have similar setups and similar vibes of the colleges. So I really enjoyed reading the book because it kind of felt like I was back in Oxford and I understood the setup of the college and the town, and so I really liked that aspect of it. So if you are interested in reading in like an academic setting type story, then maybe you'll enjoy this book. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump into the spoilery version. So if you haven't read the book, then don't keep watching, but if you don't plan on reading the book and just kind of want to hear what happens, keep watching. Okay, so I want to say that the ending made me really angry because I really enjoyed the whole like grieving wife storyline, which sounds really sad. I haven't read that many books about a spouse who loses their other spouse and is like dealing with the grief and like the hole that leaves behind. And so it was really heartbreaking reading about it throughout the book. She's just constantly being reminded of like her husband who she loved so much, and the way he died was so tragic. He drowned while they were on a vacation together. And so I really liked reading about it because I haven't read much about that. And I also really appreciated the excerpts from poetry by Alfred Tennyson. And so I really was like, I felt like I was going through like this grief with Mariana. So I did really like that aspect of the book, especially because it was something that I had never read before. But then later, after the end of the book, you're like, everything that we thought about the relationship was completely fake, and it just is like, well, why? It felt annoying that they built up this like relationship and you felt so horrible for the main character, and then she already like has gone through so much, and then she finds out at the end of the book that her husband was a complete freak. So we'll talk about more about that later, but that kind of rubbed me the wrong way. Next up, when she gets to Cambridge, it's understandable that as a family member of Zoe and who is concerned about her niece, she wants to get answers to what happened to Zoe's friend when she was murdered. But the fact that she's just like, I'm gonna go all detective, is so weird to me. Even though the police were wrong about stuff and she was uncovering things, I definitely understood the chief of police when he's like, stop it interfering with my investigation, like what are you doing? Because it was just random. Yes, she was a psychologist, so there were some things that she could, you know, have like an eye for and be able to tell when people were lying, but as we can see, she gets fooled. So it's like, I just thought it was dumb how she was like, I'm gonna stay here and like prove that this guy is the murderer because I have a feeling about it. I have a gut feeling, and she was wrong. That whole premise in general was just like kind of funny to me. I was like, what? Why are you doing this? Like, stay out of it? Let the police do their job? Usually when a main character like inserts themselves in situations where they're being told to leave it alone, there's a more driving factor for why they are like inserting themselves and trying to figure something out, and you're like rooting for them. But half the time I was like, why isn't she just like going home or like leave everyone alone? I don't know, maybe that's just me, but let me know if you thought the same thing. Obviously, another thing is she spent so long being convinced it was the professor that we knew the entire time it wasn't going to be the professor. Obviously, that's the case with any murder mystery ever, is it's never who you think it is. So it makes sense why she thought it was him, but as a reader, it got kind of boring to read about her consistently convincing herself that he was the murderer when we're just like sitting here, you know, from an outsider's point of view being like, it's obviously not him. Like, or else the book wouldn't have ended within the first 4 chapters. Because I don't know about you, but I got bored reading about that because I was just sitting here like reading through the scenes and I'm like, he's obviously not the murderer, or else the story would be over. Can we move on? So let's finally talk about the ending. It made no sense. And I think the reason that it made no sense is because in The Silent Patient, the ending was such a surprise, but it made sense. As soon as the twist happened and you realized, you know, like who the murderer was the whole time, you're literally just like, oh. You're like, oh my gosh. And everything clicks into place and you're like, how did I miss it? All this crazy stuff. And those are the best kinds of endings. But with this ending, when we find out that Zoe is the murderer, you're just like, what? And you're just confused. And all of a sudden, this girl who seems like she's just been normal the whole time has just gone completely crazy. And there was no signs showing that she was going to be the murderer. Like, no small hints, you know, leading up to her being the murderer. And then as a reader, we're just like, oh my gosh, how did I miss it? She is revealed as a murderer, and you're just like, what? This is so dumb. Obviously, Zoe ended up being the murderer because then it's revealed that there was this crazy abusive relationship between Mariana's husband and Zoe. When Zoe was young as a teenager, he had this crazy like abusive affair with her, and basically we're convinced that they were in love. Basically, Mariana's husband was a complete psycho. And you're just like, as a reader, I was just so confused because we spent the entire story feeling really horribly for Mariana and just being invested in their relationship. Oh, by the way, your ex-husband who you love so much and that who you're grieving was this crazy abusive man to your niece, and it caused her to go psycho, and he was planning on killing people. I just thought it was a cop-out. I really thought it was a cop-out. It would have been much more interesting if the murderer had ended up being a character in the story that was like present. Because her late husband is dead, he is not in the book, so you can just kind of like dump everything onto him and say he was crazy, and like you never hear from him. Even though he had his journal excerpts, it just wasn't enough. There were no hints in the journal excerpts that it could potentially be him. Maybe there were a few, but it just wasn't enough. It really felt like a cop-out ending. It just felt like he wasn't sure who to make the murderer and what to do for this crazy twist, that he just made it the husband. And I just felt like Mariana has already been done so dirty with her husband, you know, dying and dealing with that. And then now you're gonna tell her that the man that she was married to for years was crazy and a horrible human being. Like, she doesn't deserve that, and it just doesn't make sense. As a reader, like, that was not a satisfying ending. So not only was that whole plot point not satisfying, because it just felt like such a cop-out. It was like all of a sudden Zoe's crazy and Sebastian was crazy. And you're just like, okay. I just have to take that at face value because, I mean, what else can you do? Just be like, oh. I don't know. Am I the only one who had this reaction to the ending? I really thought it was a huge cop-out, and it was not a satisfying ending at all. Also, the very last page was kind of dumb. I felt like it was supposed to be a dramatic last page where, you know, she like goes into the room to see Zoe, but like, okay, Zoe's crazy and Mariana's going in to talk to her. Like, that's not a dramatic ending. I remember reading the last page and just wanting to know, like, well, what happens when she goes. Actually, you know what? I didn't even want to know. It wasn't even interesting, like, what happens when she goes in the room to see Zoe. Because sounds like the doctor said Zoe basically had, like, a psychotic breakdown. And so I don't really care what's gonna happen. The ending to this novel was unlike anything that I've ever read, and not in a good way. Those are basically my thoughts on The Maidens by Alex Michaelides. This was kind of a bash review, but I didn't think it was that good. I was pretty invested in the story as I was reading the book. It was just the ending that ruined it. In his previous novel, it was the ending that really made the story. Honestly, I wasn't even a huge fan of The Silent Patient. Like, throughout the book, I got bored at times. And then it was the ending that was like, oh my gosh. But this book, I was pretty invested in the story, and then the ending ruined it. It really ruined it. I was like, that's dumb. That's a cop-out. Anyway, let me know if you have read this book, if you have similar opinions. I want to make sure I'm not the only one who feels this way. I stand by my 2 out of 5 stars. I definitely am down to talk about it in the comments, so leave me a comment about your thoughts on the book. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this video, even though it was a little bit of just a rant. Alex Michaelides, this is not me coming for you as a person, just as a writer. But I really loved Silent Patient, so just write one like that again. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a like and subscribe if you want to see more videos from me. Thank you to everyone who has subscribed so far. If you have, I really appreciate it. I'm very grateful to you all. Thanks again for watching. I will see you in my next video. Bye.